trying to, maybe give us a little update, to see your brief tenure on, almost 2 months, right? It's done with 2 months in the,
Yep,
this
just
mayor.
about 2 months.
And then we'll just get into some of the questions about the school committee contract, budgeting for this year for public safety, and any new initiatives that might be
Okay.
in the economic development. So why don't you just tell us briefly, how's it going? Is the
It's going good. I mean, it's 2 months. It's a lot of, it's a lot busier than just being on the city council. You end up, doing a lot of little ribbon cuttings here and there, that type of thing. I think, and I've said this before, what I think is the most important function of the mayor is being on the school committee. And I still see it that way. I think that any city council that becomes a mayor has 2 years to have a positive impact on the school district, and that's what I'm going to try to do. In January, I brought in a motion before the school committee to have a STEM curriculum at Lowell High that would be sort of a counterpart to the Latin Lyceum, and the superintendent thinks it's a good idea as well. I think the high school has something that they call Pathways, which they claim is very close to a STEM curriculum, but they don't call it a STEM curriculum, they call it Pathways, and so nobody really knows what Pathways is, so it's almost a marketing thing, whereas, STEM, everybody understands what STEM is. And I think that STEM curriculums are really important because that's where the jobs will be in the future, and I think that when young families are looking to decide where they want to buy, if there's a STEM curriculum at the high school, I think that's a big plus. And if it is true that Pathways is pretty close to STEM, then why aren't we calling it STEM? And then, the final point I'd make is that the U.S. News and World Report, which ranks schools and universities across the country, also ranks STEM curriculum, STEM high schools. And there are about 15 STEM high schools in Massachusetts that are ranked in the top 200 or 300 by U.S. News and World Report. So, I'm not saying that we'll immediately jump into that, but certainly the first step is to have a STEM curriculum established at the high school. So that's I consider that to be a big deal.
What would that cost in new funding?
I don't think it's going to cost much in new funding. There will have to be sort of a realignment of teachers, and you might need a couple more biology teachers or that type of thing in order to beef up the existing curriculum. But I don't think it's much more than that. I don't expect for it to be. And I have had discussions with the superintendent about it. He's totally on board with it. He thinks it's a good idea, and he's told me that there'll be a STEM curriculum at Lowell High School by September, which is pretty quick. So hopefully that will come to pass. I mean, there are other grades in the school district where they've already got STEM, but they don't have it at the high school, and I think there'll be a gap in the junior high school. But you'll now be able to take a STEM curriculum actually once it's at the high school from first grade on right through to the University of Lowell if you chose to go there.
Now, when you're happy with the new contract that was signed, and even though it was a slight upgrade from what was proposed previously, it's still going to add to the deficit situation. And we had the superintendent in here, a couple of weeks ago to talk about the budget and the racial incident at the school, and he didn't really seem too disturbed about the possibility of having a deficit. He said if we have to cut, we'll cut, and even if that means eliminating teachers. So what do we really gain? I mean, if the money is not forthcoming, unless we raise taxes in the city.
I think that this school committee, which had five out of the 7 members were brand new and were not involved in the negotiations, which were ongoing for a 2-year period. It was unfortunate that the previous school committee didn't settle that contract, but I thought that it was important to get that out of the way, get it settled so that it wasn't just hanging over, and I think if we're going to have any progress over the next 2 years, that was something that had to be done. A lot of the negotiations that went on before us were didn't seem that it was practical to revisit those. I know that there was an issue over the dress code of the teachers at the high school. And I also know that the previous school committee offered them 3.5. So we settled on 3.75, which it will end up being a lot. There's enough money to cover it this year, up until June 30th. It will be next year that will be the challenge. But you know, I'm pretty confident that we can take care of that. I think $250,000 is not a big upgrade. It wasn't practical for us to go back to zero or anything, so we were really kind of locked in at the 3.5 and going forward from there. I think that one of the things that we did before we made a decision on the contract was to ask the superintendent to provide us with a scenario of what it would look like if we approved 3.75, and he did that and showed us, you know, where the cuts would come and where, you know, whether there would be layoffs and where those layoffs would have to be. But I think on the flip side, maybe that's not going to be so harsh because we're anticipating through the governor's budget that there'll be a $3 million increase at least, depending on what the House and Senate do with the budget. And the other thing that...
So you're already planning to spend that money that we don't have yet?
Well,
because that's what Kalfawi said that day.
Well, let me finish.
Yeah.
I think that more importantly than that, because I would like not to spend that money,
Yeah.
but I think that we would be able to realign money that's maybe being sort of wasted. We spend a lot, you know, in the vicinity of about $6 million on kids that go out of the district. That's what we pay for them. And then on top of that,
You mean for special services?
Yeah. And then on top of that, we spend, the city spends money on the transportation for those students. And that's not just a regular school bus, that in most cases is special transportation. If we can bring those kids in and find a place to have them be right in here, that's a tremendous savings for the city. Not only that, but if we had the capacity for even more kids than what we send out, that program would end up generating revenue for the school district. So I think that that's, you know, one of the big initiatives that the superintendent and the school committee are looking forward to. I think it's long overdue. I don't know why they didn't do this years ago, but they didn't. And but I think that we should do it now. And so there are several different options of facilities that we're looking at, and hopefully one of those will come to fruition. But you know, that alone would be able to fund the raise. And you know, the superintendent was in favor of the contract, and felt it was necessary to do two things. One, he feels it's necessary to pay the teachers in Lowell more than maybe some other districts, just because it's a little more challenging job and also allows them to get, you know, better teachers, to attract better teachers. You know, so that ends up being an important part of it as well. But he also thought that the contract should be settled, and that we just should move on from that.
On the contract issue, you know, you're the new mayor, but you've been around long enough to know the UTL and the acrimonious relationship that it's had with the school committee over the years. Why is it that every 2 or every 3 years, you know, the city gets to a point where the UTL is working for months without a contract, you know, it gets nasty, you know, the city wants the UTL to take less money, Georgia says no, you know, regardless of what financial constraints the city is under, you know, Georgia's doesn't budge, and
Yes.
eventually the city gives in. So what has to happen for, you know, maybe a contract to get solved,
Well,
get resolved, you know,
we'll be
in a timely, fair manner?
Yes, we'll be into negotiations for the new contract right now, but I think that George's is smart. He's a good negotiator, and what he chooses to do is negotiate retroactively, so that, for instance, in the contract going now, we can't say for certain how much money the school department is going to have for raises, but after the state contract's done, he'll know exactly to the dollar how much money is available. And I think that's what he likes to do, and I think that's what, part of the reason why he's been so successful is he's always been able to say to the school department, I know you got this much money, so, you know, we want it all. And that's what he's able to do, and I think he does that, you know, that's how this contract was. He, you know, it waited 2 years, and it got settled afterwards. You know, but it also got settled when he knew exactly how much money there was. So I think what we really need to do, what the school department should do, is develop a strategy where, the school committee, where we're negotiating up front without having him know exactly how much money is there. And I really think that that's, from his point of view, I think that it is an excellent strategy. But from the school committee's point of view, I think it puts us, we'd be better off negotiating forward than negotiating backwards.
Well, you said, you know, it was felt that it was best to settle this, this contract to make progress, go forward, okay? Why is progress tied to money? There's so many companies that have made progress without, you know, during tough economic times, without giving their employees, you know, pay raises, okay? And in the private sector, and these teachers are already amongst the top. They're in the top of, they're rivaling Andover now, okay? I think they're in the top 10 percentile in the state for teachers being paid. You got 14 you know, underperforming schools, I think. Is that how many there are? Level 4. You know, they keep talking about progress. And you know, nothing against the last mayor and the people who negotiated. They actually brought Paul George's to a standstill. He couldn't do anything. This went to arbitration and everything else. And there's a lot of people out there who felt, taxpayers in Lowell said, hey, don't give him anything, you know? And yet here we are again, now we're already starting negotiations for a new contract.
Yes.
And the will of this school committee with, the way I see it, this is just my opinion, former school committee members, okay, or teachers, all right, they're gonna side with the teaching side, and yet we're gonna be stuck in the same situation.
I'm hoping we're not stuck in the same situation. And when I say progress, I mean that, you know, if you have teachers that were, you know, that were refusing to do, because of the contract wasn't settled, were refusing to do anything after school or anything extra, that's not a good situation. We do have, not 14 schools, I think, but we have three schools in the district that are on the brink of going to level 4. And if one of those schools goes to level 4, the whole district goes to level 4. That's just what they do. And if the whole district goes to level 4, that's just really bad psychologically for the school district, but also for the community.
So what's that have to do with money? So the teachers are gonna throw in the towel because they didn't get a 2% pay raise?
I think that getting the contract settled and getting that out of the way allows us to move on with other things towards improving the district. You know, could we have done that without the raise? You know, maybe you could have, but I don't think that it would have gone all that smoothly. And I think that we've got, you know, we've switched off from MCAS to a different testing service with the okay of the commissioner. By 2019, the school district has to have computers for every single kid, because those tests in 2019 are going to be given only by the computer. So we don't have that capacity now, and we're a long way from having that capacity, but we got to get there by 2019 as well. So I think that, to me, the raises were okay just to move ahead. We do have another contract, and I felt that for this school committee, which had 5 members that weren't on it, it's really unfair to just judge them by this contract. You really need to judge them by both contracts. So before you come in with a verdict, I think you need to wait and see how we do on the new contract, which I think will be a lot better than what we did on this one. I think it was tough just because those negotiations went on. You know, when I talk about progress, it's not just for the high school or the STEM curriculum. I think we also want to get those schools that are on the brink, you know, into a safer position than what they are now, because they threaten to bring down the whole system. When young families are looking on whether they're going to decide, we compete at some level with other mid-sized mill cities. You know, in our school district is usually compared to Brockton and you know, Lynn and Lawrence and so forth. But we compete for young families with the surrounding community. We compete with Drake, we compete with Tewksbury, and all of those communities. And so a school district, nobody's gonna wanna live, nobody's gonna buy a house in Lowell. So it's gonna hurt property values, and so I think you have to look at the whole big picture before you make a decision on that. And I felt the raises were okay. I think if, there was 3.5 on the table, 3.75 is only another $250,000, which in the big scheme of things isn't so much money. And I do think that there is I do think that there's a scenario in which we could come up with that money for the next year. So,
But now putting on your counselor hat, the mayoral hat, Murphy's in negotiations with a whole bunch of municipal unions, right?
yes.
That are all coming up. Are they gonna be looking for the same amount? And if they are, can the city pay that? I mean, just a year or two ago, Murphy put a hiring freeze on, right? Didn't it?
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah,
it's not like the
committee
city
had
is
to
flush
review
with
those.
cash.
No,
But so how is this going to affect this situation on the city side?
I look at this contract that was just settled as being a retro contract. So I look at the contracts that the city manager is negotiating now as being concurrent with the negotiations that we'll be doing going forward. And so it will help in that way. I mean, we're not gonna, I don't think that the next contract's gonna be anywhere near the way the past contract was.
You're gonna negotiate the same way, with a three-person negotiating team?
I don't favor that. I mean, I'm not the final decision on that, but I really think that the whole school committee or a subcommittee of the school committee is the one that should be negotiating. They are the ones that are the decision makers. And I think it's better. I don't think that it worked all that well to have the 3 members, because at the table, they had to always go back. So I don't really know that worked out all that well. And the only thing that happened is nothing happened for 2 years, so.
So your suggestion, go back to a full school committee participation?
Yes, or preferably a subcommittee, but I understand that that's difficult just because everybody on the school committee would want to be on the subcommittee.
It sounds like you're not really satisfied with the contract. Is that accurate to say? It sounds like, talking about what the next one would be, the next one would be a better contract.
I would have preferred if the school committee could have negotiated the whole contract, or if on January 4th that everything went back to the beginning, and we would have just started all over. And if there was an expiration when the school committee expires, if there was an expiration date, but that was not the case. That's not how it is. And so, we really came in the 9th inning to finish off that contract.
You're not the superintendent of schools, and I don't wanna put you on the spot. I mean, the STEM idea sounds like a real good idea, but we've been hearing the same thing. I've been on Lowell now for 25 years. I've been hearing the same thing. We compete, with these areas around us, and no one's gonna come in and buy houses. I just think that's just another negotiating ploy. I said, it's just that, who's gonna hold these schools accountable? Lowell does a pretty good job for the demographics that it's dealing with, okay? And the teachers do a pretty good job, but at the same time, I mean, I think the city's gonna take a broader picture of education, and I mean, you got charter schools here. School committee doesn't favor charter schools, and yet every time competition comes up, that's the thing that really helps education. And some of these kids, the enrollment is going down. It's not going up, except for a few pockets in the elementary and middle school. So I mean, if people want to be visionary, why aren't they looking ahead? Why isn't the city council and the school committee or the leaders looking ahead to what education should be in the city, and set a new model for other urban centers? You're talking about gateway cities, Brockton and everything else, that we could do it better. You got Middlesex, you got UMass Lowell, who was talking about that triumvirate and stuff. So why don't the public charter schools become part of that? Because a lot of those kids are leaving the Lowell system and going to the charter schools, but yet this school committee and this school administration are in denial.
I'm not sure if the school committee's in denial.
Well, they're all against charter schools. We
Yes.
did when they ran for election, we polled, they're all against charter schools.
Right.
Whether they did that just to get votes, okay, from the 650 people who live in Lowell, who teach in the school system, or the paraprofessionals who put it over 1,000, okay, I don't know. But
I think the only reason to be against charter schools is because of the way the funding is. any type of school in a mill building, I don't think anybody would believe it, but it looks good over there, and I think that they do a good job. You know,
And they do it for a lot less money than what goes into the Lowell public schools. They pay their teachers less, okay, and they're getting results.
Well, the
Yes.
teachers aren't unionized, remember that.
Oh, by point.
Well,
Why does the
That's a
teacher
big
have to be,
difference.
why does the teacher have to be unionized in order to succeed?
You
The
think you
kids
wanna
in
go
the
down that
classroom.
road?
you know what else is a big difference is the population is different, right? I mean, they
More
don't,
than it's students.
if they have problem kids, they don't keep the kids at school. You know, that's a whole different thing, and that's big. And if you talk to teachers in the Lowell School District, they'll tell you how rough it is on an everyday basis. And, you know, it's rough whether you're in the first grade or you're in high school, it doesn't matter. It's just, you know, it's a challenging population.
To go back to bringing some of the special ed students back into the district, are you confident that could happen this fall? And that alone could bridge the thing?
I'm hoping that can happen this fall. I think it can happen as long as we find a facility that can accommodate those. We did look at one school that's being underutilized and wondered whether or not we could just have somebody build there, but because it's school property, it has to be compliant with the state. It's always gonna be way too expensive. But there are several other sites in the city that we're looking at, and some of those should be able to accommodate all of those kids and more. So hopefully one of those sites will come up.
But and I applaud you for looking at different ways to look at budgets and issues, but aren't many of the reasons those children are headed out of district because they have severe and significant disabilities and needs, that just having a facility that can house them, well, you still may have to staff very differently, or there's a bunch of those children that are with serious issues that cannot be brought back in.
What I've been told is that it's more an issue of capacity. We do have a small program up at the Laurel Lee that I think has 19 kids at up on Johnson Street at the corner of Plain. And that school, which is an old, wood frame school building, two-story school building, we put some kids there, but there's a lot of other kids that come out. So the idea would be to move those kids out of the Laurel Lee into a more appropriate facility, join the other kids with them. I think part of the expense is the staffing just has to be, instead of having classes with 20 kids or whatever, you have a class with maybe 3 or 5 kids, and it kind of runs like that. And so, I expect that will do. I'm not saying that it's going to be a total, you're just going to save everything. There's going to be costs involved in setting up that program, but those costs are going to be way less than what it's going to cost, what it costs now to send them out of district.
More predictable too.
Yes, and exactly, and the transportation costs are huge. That's a big chunk, and that's picked up by the city. So that's an area where we can there's a potential for a significant savings there.
But if I'm a parent of a special needs child, am I being told that I'm now gonna be able to have my child here in the city of Lowell? It's gonna cost less, but is the curriculum, is the education, is the care of that child gonna be the same or better? Or is it gonna be worse?
I think it's gonna be the same. It's not a matter of just bringing the kids in and just warehousing them someplace just to save money. I mean, we have to be able to provide a curriculum, and I think that if we're going to look ahead at maybe bringing kids in, then we have to have a pretty sound program and a good program. I think that if you're a parent of one of those students, you would much prefer to have your kid going to school in the city than going to school in Lexington or someplace every day, where it's a long ride both ways and all the rest of it. And just the idea that your child is so far away.
Do you think you could bring those kids, the sped kids in Lowell who are out of district, you could bring them back to Lowell though? I mean, what if those parents are getting a good education in a district outside of Lowell? And then in addition to that, so you were talking about hopefully bringing in extra cash by having sped students from other districts opt into Lowell?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just wondering if that would be something that's likely to happen for because I remember them, I think the previous superintendent telling me they usually don't choose opt-in for other districts, so they don't allow other districts to opt into to Lowell because the capacity is just so much, you must forget about any extra kids coming to Lowell. but do you think in the future that would be sustainable for us, even a SPED program, which would probably require even more resources and?
Yes, I do, and I think beyond that, I think that's what the superintendent thinks, and I think that the person that's in charge of those kids also thinks that it would be a lot easier to manage that program if it was done here in Lowell.
That would be a big sea change, you know, are there other gateway cities that are doing that? You know, SPED has always been one of those budget busters, you know, when school folks have complained, and rightfully so, it's an unfunded mandate by the state. You know, there's a lot of history there. It seems like if Lowell was successful in doing that, they'd be, you know, charting the course in that regard.
Yes. You know, there was an article in Commonwealth Magazine, I think pretty recently, that it talked about that, and it talked about how, you know, some older mill cities were getting, you know, it was costing them more money, and then there were other communities where they were making money because of the same situation. I don't know whether or not there are other gateway cities that do that, but that's not a reason for us not to do that.
I want to ask you about another high-profile school issue. You know, the texting that's in Lowell High School. What's your view on that? And more specifically, how do you think it was handled? And do you think that the administration, particularly the headmaster, you know, engaged in some behavior that allowed a member of the school committee's son to run in the track meet?
I don't think that I don't think it was handled correctly, probably from the very beginning. And I think, you know, maybe there was some circumstances on the first day or the second day that caused some of that to be handled incorrectly. But I do think that, you know, that occurred back in September.
Right.
I think that the school district and the community is far better off if we just look at how can we make sure that's not gonna happen again. You know, that there's not another incident of that. And I really, you know, for the most part, I kind of, aside from the way it was handled by the school administration, I think the incident itself was just a bunch of just kids who were kids and immature, you know, just fooling around on the texting, never thinking that it was going to end up, you know, becoming public. And I think that probably most of the families that were involved in that are probably pretty embarrassed that occurred for them.
So specifically, how was it mishandled? Right, is that the word you used, that it wasn't handled properly, or?
I think it could have been handled a lot differently.
How? Can you tell us how?
I think that the class president's parents should have been notified right away. The class president's parents should have been brought in. You know, I think that's one of the big failings. I think that was what was lost in the whole incident is that the kid got elected president of the class, and that was just, you know, and he's an Afro-American kid, and that just ended up all getting lost in the whole thing. And you know, and that's something that really the high school should be proud of, and the city should be proud of. And that just got swept aside. Nobody ever, you know, paid any attention to that. It was just all about the incident. You know, should the kid have been in the should the one pupil have run in the track meet? No, I don't think he should have. You know, but that's just part of the bad decision at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone keeps making that point that it was lost, that, you know, how great it is that they elected a student of color, but he's not the first one who got that class presidency.
No.
And if you look statistically at the school, you know, it's a majority minority school, so actually, I think,
30%.
yeah.
Is 30% white, and then the
Right,
rest
and then
is,
the rest is, you know, so,
Yep.
I mean, it's great, I guess, that the student of color was elected, but people keep making that point, and I don't.
Well, I think
It's a big-
African Americans
Agreed.
are in a minority though, in there's more
Right.
Cambodian, Southeast Asians
Right.
than.
Is that 30% number been about the same for, as best you know, for the last 5 or 10 years?
maybe for the past few years it's been like that, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just,
No, but there was a black president, when my kids went there, the class president was a black kid.
Yeah.
It was 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
I don't mean that that's a big point or that that's like the most important thing. I just meant that kind of got lost in the whole thing. I mean, you had Black Lives Matter coming up here, and you know, and all of that, and then, you know, and there was a black kid that was it just all got
Well,
lost.
the very fact that they didn't even tell the superintendent of schools, I mean, right off the bat. I mean,
Right.
He didn't know until the next day, he didn't know what people were actually talking about. I mean, if there was a protocol in place, they didn't follow it. If it was a protocol, it's the wrong one. I mean, that's just terrible, but anyway, I wanna switch gears.
If I can just make one more point on that, I think what that incident did do is to highlight the fact that although the student population there is pretty diverse, the faculty is not. The faculty is something like 88% white, and I think that there are kids that go to school there and that have gone to school there in recent years that will tell you that there are some members of the faculty that will treat some kids differently from others. And that's a culture that has to, change and continue to change going forward. And I think the superintendent is aware of that, and I think the superintendent also would like to try to bring a lot more diversification into the faculty itself rather than just the students.
Yeah, you mentioned that. How he does that, we'll have to see.
Yeah, but that might be a good thing that comes out of the whole thing, is if we can do that going ahead, and have, and at the same time keep quality teachers, then that's a good thing to do.
Okay, let's talk about city finances, okay? What shape are they in, what are you looking at in this budget, that you see, might be coming out through the city manager, and what the council might like to see in this new budget? And
I think the council's
will there
always.
be a tax increase? Will there be a tax increase?
I would hope if there's a tax increase that it's minimal. I mean, we did have 2 years when we had no tax increase, and then we had a third year where there was a tax increase, and there was some complaint about it, but I think that really what people had to do was to, say, well, wait a minute, there's a tax increase this year, but we had 2 years when there wasn't one. Excuse me. And the economy in the third year was stronger than the economy in the first 2 years, and so everybody was better off doing that. I think it's unreasonable to think that, we can move forward every year with no tax increase. But I do think that if we can get in a position and become stable enough so that we're having a small tax increase every year, I think that that's acceptable, and I think that that's probably how most people run their own households, and so that's how they would expect, they'd expect the city to be no different.
Any significant initiatives that you're looking for, whether it's capital improvements or anything in this budget any inside tips you can give us?
Side tips. One of the things that I'm pretty big on is having a business improvement district downtown, a bid. And I know the bid is somewhat controversial, but for the time that I've been back on the city council, and it was even probably true when I was on before, the downtown is nobody works in a collaborative way at all. So that you've got different groups, you've got the chamber and different little business groups, and they're all doing different things. And you've got you have stores and property owners, and they're all doing different things, and nobody seems to talk to one another. And there's not one group that sort of molds them together. And I think that that's a bad thing. One of the things that I've pointed out in the past is that the second largest voting precinct in the city right now is downtown. After 1, 2, and Belvedere, the second largest one is downtown. And so there's a lot of people that are downtown, yet all of the stores open at 9 when the people go to work, and all the stores close at 5 when the people come home. So why is it that they aren't open on, a couple of evenings? I mean, I think that the people who live down there would like that, and I also think that they would do better, but there isn't, there's been an effort here and there to do that, and there are some stores that will open and they do it for a couple of weeks and it doesn't work out, because it only works if everybody does it, and that's how the malls work. Everybody, if you rent space in a mall, if you even open 15 minutes late, you get a letter saying, don't be late anymore, or you get a fine. If you have dirty windows, you get a letter saying clean your windows. And so, you do. And that's kind of how those work, and that's kind of how the downtown has to work. And so I really would like to see the downtown try a bid at least on a pilot basis for, say, 3 to 5 years and see how that goes. And the bid, if you're not familiar with it, would be basically extra money that would be charged to all of the property owners on an annual basis. That money would be pulled together into a budget, and then the property owners would meet and determine how that money was gonna be spent. So they'd be able to spend, if they wanted to hire a window washer guy to come in every, Sunday and clean all the windows for the week, they could do that. If they wanted to have, sidewalk entertainment on Saturdays or at certain times, they could do that. If they wanted to put flower boxes, they could maintain those flower boxes, they could do that stuff. It would be for extra stuff that would enhance the central business district, and it would not be anything that would take the place of the money that wouldn't be used for plowing or trash collection and stuff that the city's doing anyways. I really think that the downtown should give that a try for a 3 to 5 year period. And I think the other thing that it would do, almost in a natural way, is it would bring all of those people together, because they would have the financial investment. They would be working together, and they would become the group, the chamber, if you will, or the main business group for the downtown. And I think that's an important thing. And I think it would be great if the paper could get behind that, because we've been talking about it. Michael Gallagher's, involved in that. There's a little video that's been put together for that. And they have it in other communities. I mean, downtown Boston has it. I think they have one in Taunton, they have one in West Springfield, and maybe Greenfield, or Northampton.
But where does it stand though? I mean, we've been hearing about it for like a year.
Right,
I mean,
no.
has it moved from like the conceptual stage to a stage where someone has to vote on it? And
We
it's
had-
a real deal?
We had a subcommittee meeting a couple of months ago, when we saw the video. I have a motion on for Tuesday. And at that meeting, what was decided was that the Division of Planning and Development would do a survey of all the property owners. And so I have a motion on Tuesday to ask for an update on that survey. And it's just been, it's troublesome getting it off the ground. There are, I've talked to some property owners that think it's, worth a shot, it's
Yeah,
gonna try.
not everyone does though.
Not everyone does, and it's kind of, everybody has to buy in, or at least a high percentage of people have to buy in order for it to be done. And I think that, when it was first proposed, it was a much larger district than maybe is practical, at least starting out. If we just stick with the central business district, or what you would visually say is the central business district, that would probably be better off. And it's also gonna require participation, financial participation by Middlesex Community College and the university. And I think they should be willing to participate at least on the short term. They're part of the downtown, they've got property downtown, and so, and their money would be, it would be important.
Just don't bill it like a payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah,
Have you people discussed it at the Lowell plan at all?
It has, at its point, it's been kicked around, jump starts, then it goes into pause for a while. And then the problem you're always gonna face is you've gotta find half a dozen champions that are business owners there that can evangelize this.
Don't you have that,
To the other
Bill?
business owners.
You have that, don't you?
we
well,
have
Because you got
some-
Gallagher, right, you got Duncan, a couple of other guys that are really into it.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I'm saying you've gotta take it the level, I don't mean a level down, but a
Grassroots
level
level.
up.
Oh, I see what you
You've
mean.
gotta do the ones that are really gonna network with one another, look after one another, put some pressure, peer pressure on one another. Because their mentality has always been, what are you gonna give me?
right,
What are you gonna do for me? I don't have any money, help me out.
right.
And it's the restaurants primarily.
Well, Teddy from the Athenian Corner, he's on board, and he's got a microphone.
Yeah.
So he's more important than maybe the other restaurant owners, and he's on board, and he's kind of a small guy. There are 2 or 3 pieces of property that were recently bought by, with the Union National Bank, the Chinese family from Drake had bought that property, and that's like 7 buildings. And then across the street where Brian's Ivy Hall is, that was bought by a Chinese family from Chumsted. So there's been some turnover from the Saab empire. And so, it's gonna be important to get those people on board. Mr. Bertros, who owns property on Merrimack Street, might be challenging, but,
So,
That was Giovanni's.
yeah, Giovanni,
Yeah.
yeah.
and that's what it is what's it gonna do for me? But I think on the short term, and if you realize that you have control over the money and how it's spent, then, you know, it's worth a shot on the, at least for a short time. And if it doesn't work after 3 or 5 years, then maybe it was not a good idea for Lowell, but I really think that it is. I also think it's something that would work up in Couple Square on a much smaller basis. But, you know, Couple Square, in terms of the local business districts in the city, Couple Square is maybe one of the more vibrant. And they also seem to have now a little business community together. I mean, I went to a meeting there, you know, a couple of months ago, there were probably 40 people in there. And so, you know, that's probably, they're probably one of the best local business districts to try it in. And I've been given some thought to maybe it's better to try it on the local business first, so that the central business can see how it works. But I'm just not sure of that. But anyways, for now, I do have a motion on for Tuesday asking that the city manager give us a report on how that survey worked out.
And then the council has to approve that? Like, what's the?
The council has to approve it because it's legislation that allows for that,
Yeah.
but it really is not, it's the property owners that they're the ones that make all the decisions on how the money is spent and everything else. And so that's kind of how it would be.
Speaking of economic development, Kronos moving to Cross Point is obviously a big story. The manager has been more aggressive with TIFs than at least his predecessor, maybe a few predecessors. Kronos will add to the list. Barclay, Metrographics, Somerset Industries, I think. What do you make of TIFs? How necessary are they for Lowell to attract businesses?
They seem to be necessary because other communities offer them, and so in order to compete, you need to be able to offer the TIF. You know, the Kronos TIF is a little bit different from maybe some others in that Kronos isn't gonna own that property, they have a 12-year lease there. So, you know, generally, you know, TIFs go, you own the property, right, because it's a tax thing. And so, my understanding is the way that TIF will work is it will go through Cross Point, from Kronos through Cross Point. So, essentially, Kronos is gonna take one of the 3 towers, and so the TIF would be for, say, 33% of the property, it would kind of go like that. I think for Lowell, it will be good to be able to say that Kronos chose Lowell and is moved to Lowell. I think that's a good thing. Going forward, when you're trying to get other businesses to come in.
What kind of job do you think the city manager's been doing? Are you pleased with his performance?
Yeah, I am pleased with his performance. I think that he's my 4th city manager.
Who was your first?
Topia.
Okay.
You know, Topia was probably my favorite city manager. I think Topia had 2 different things that he could do. Topia was very strong financially, and he was also, you know, a good politician. You know, after him, when Tully came, Tully was a good politician, maybe not as strong.
Not as good on the detail?
Right, yeah. On the other hand, I can remember people putting in, you know, people would want a stop sign. You know, Bernie Lynch would be like, well, we gotta do this, we gotta get state approval for the stop sign. With Tully, the stop sign would be up like Wednesday morning. You know, he was just a different type of guy. But I think for Kevin Murphy, Kevin Murphy is a lot different than Bernie Lynch was. I think that he seems to communicate better with the council. And I also think that there's a change in just the attitude at City Hall.
Let's get back to the housing market, which real estate you know so well. Tell us a little about the trends you see in the Lowell housing market. Is there any, I was talking to Sue LeMay, she said that the multifamily homes have increased in value at a much higher rate than the single-family homes. She said largely because you know, all those foreclosures and a lot of them now they've been bought and some of them being turned over now at, you know, much higher prices than what they were bought off the foreclosure market. They're also income producing. But is there any one section of the city that is doing better than the other, Pawtucketville, or how do you see
I don't
it?
think so, but I would point out that I don't do single-family appraisals. I do commercial appraisals, which includes, you know, large apartment properties and stuff like that. I think that, you know, there has been an increase in, you know, those 3 garden-style 24-unit buildings that you see here and there, those go up, and they're almost in their own little genre. The people that seem to buy and sell those properties, they tend to hold on to them for a long time, and people like those properties, partly because the maintenance in general for the outside, I think, is, isn't that great. I think that one of the things that's helping multifamily properties would be that it's hard to buy a house now. So you have a lot of people that are renting just because, for the down payment. You get out of school and you got loans to pay. It's going to take you a while before you can get the down payment, and so you end up renting. And I think that's why you see a lot of those big apartment complexes, popping up, like the one on River Road out in Tewksbury, and there's a couple in Wilmington. The rents in those places are real high, but it's a acceptable alternative to buying a house on the short term for people that have a lot of debt from college and so forth. And so what would help the market a real lot, I think, is if you could get those people out of that debt, some of that college debt, and then they'd be able to spend their money on buying a house.
But do you see Lowell's, we've heard some plans about even nonprofits building more apartments or houses. The Lowell House wants to do the treatment center. The Lowell Housing Authority is proposing to build more public housing up behind the former church. There's still people looking. I mean, we don't have that much land, but they're still looking to build these things. Is that good, bad for Lowell, or?
Some of it's good. I think it depends on where it's going to go. I mean, on Merrimack Street, maybe looks like an okay place right now, but maybe in 5 years it won't be an okay place. I mean, it would be really nice if we could connect the downtown to the university that way. And what I've proposed in the past is maybe putting, those Victorian streetlights along that section. And then the other thing that, I was at a ribbon cutting maybe a month ago, and when I came outside, someone said, well, the building right next door used to be the Royal Theater, which I don't know if anybody here remembers the Royal Theater. You probably remember the Royal Theater, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So the Royal Theater was a place where, I never got to go there.
How about the Rialto?
I could go to the Rialto, but I couldn't go to the Royal. The Royal was off limits.
Oh, I see.
It was just, maybe the movies that were shown were condemned by the pilot or something.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. But anyways, the Royal that building is still there, and that guy is looking at, it's a guy named Tran that owns it. I think he's from Drake, and what he's looking to do is either put apartments in there, or somebody said that he was also looking at putting an SRO, a boarding house in there. So, I said, well, Jesus, putting a boarding house in there that's like going in the complete opposite direction from where we want to go for that area. But I really do think that if we could restore the Royal Theater there, it would be an anchor for a lot of other communities. If you could go to a movie there, I think that would help that whole area and helps make that connection. They did a survey up at the university a short while ago, and they asked the students what are the 3 things that were most important to them. And number 1 was having a movie theater. Number 2 was bowling alley, which kind of surprised me. And number 3 was a Mexican restaurant, which didn't surprise me at all. But I didn't realize bowling was back. It's just,
Been out to Tewksbury? Been out to the Caswell?
no, I haven't been out.
Very busy.
Eddie, speaking of those 3 uses, do you think any of them would be appropriate for the big chunk of Jean d'Arc property that's vacant now, across from Archambault Towers? They own that, where the White Eagle used to be, and
Yeah.
that big piece of property there. And,
They might be. I mean, I look at the university as
or what
being-
is, or what would be appropriate?
Yeah, I look at the downtown, the university as being in transition, so that it really is still a commuter school. Most people that.
You just don't tell them that.
Well, it is, and I think if you say that to them, they'll admit that. But I think that as they, start to build more dormitories, that's gonna change over. And the more dormitories that they can build, the better off we'll be, but hopefully they would be, privately owned dormitories that would be leased to the university.
So you think that could be an appropriate spot for a dormitory?
Yeah, sure it could. You know, it wouldn't be a bad spot for a dormitory at all. The challenge is, and I talked to Monty Meehan about this, and I've also talked to Jackie Maloney about this, the challenge is, you know, how do you build a dormitory and go and have it be privately owned so that it you know, has the tax base, but still provides, you know, student housing.
Well, there's been companies that want to build private dormitories in there, but they haven't been able to do the deal.
Most of them haven't, but, you know, over off of Burlington Ave,
Right,
there's
yeah.
that big one, and they just added on, so I have to think that what they've done is just to amend the existing lease that they have, which I believe is a 40-year lease. So if you get more of those leases and bring more students into the downtown, I think what you're gonna end up seeing in a natural way is the type of retail will be different. It will change, and you'll have retail that is similar to what you see down in Alston, similar to what you see down on Thayer Ave, where Brown is, down in Providence, and other places where there's university. You see a little bit of it on University Ave, but there'd be even more of that. And so anyways, let me just go back to the Royal. The Royal is really probably the last old theater in Lowell, and it's kind of changed around. But there are theaters in Lexington Center and in Arlington Center and in other places that do pretty well showing independent films and say B-run films and stuff, and it's not a bad, you know, it's just a more relaxed, intimate thing. Maybe the theater only has like 50 or 60 seats, you know, kind of like that. But you know, if you did that, and then you had, I think a couple of restaurants would pop up, and then all of a sudden you got people, you know, hanging around there, and students would come down, and then, you know, and then that spawns more and more development and kind of just sort of bolsters up that whole street, which is really the main connector street between the university and the downtown.
What's gonna happen to the Lowell Memorial Auditorium? And are you happy with the contract that's being, the performance by this company that's running both?
No, I'm not.
I would think, you know, I get a lot of complaints from business owners saying that, when there's no events down there, they don't do anything.
Yeah.
At least they get people traffic when there are events down there. And even though we looked at it, and I don't know if it was you or someone was saying that they ran just as many events as they did last year, it sure didn't seem that way. You know, maybe they're dance events, you know, the kids go in there and dance and stuff like that. And that's what Tommy McKay did, you know, open it up to the community and stuff. But, I mean, to produce revenue and stuff like that, the place is still a pit, okay? I mean, it's just, it's not first class, and what gets me is that, you know, people talk about Lowell and the vision and going, and yet that place is crumbling. They put new doors on it, you know, it's just a mess. And it's not getting the necessary attention from the board of directors who were supposed to be holding those was it Stratagem? Is that the new company now? Spectrum, change the name, Spectrum. I mean, what's gonna happen there?
Last week I met with a couple of people from the Merrimack Regional Theater, and they were in, and they just were kind of talking about, you know, what was going on over there. So I asked them about the facility and what they thought about it, and I was working out for them, and they had two issues that I've told the city manager about, and I think that both will be addressed. But one was the restrooms, I guess, were in pretty bad shape, particularly the ladies' room. But the other thing is the handicapped access was really bad.
Yeah.
So that you could go up the ramp. If you were going to the theater alone, you'd go up the ramp. When you got to the ramp, you couldn't get in. You had to wait for somebody to get you in.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that's just unacceptable and shouldn't be that way. And it kind of amazes me that it's been that way for as long as it is. So, and the restrooms are important because the Merrimack Regional Theater, there's a lot of people from out of town that go there and that are season ticket holders and so forth. And they go there because it ends up being it's live theater and it's a good night. But they're not going to do that if you know, if the restrooms are really ratty and so that isn't going to work out. And I think it's important to keep. You know, I'm proud that we have the Merrimack Regional Theater in Lowell, and I think that we want to keep it. And they've been there a long time, and they do well, and it's important. In terms of the bigger auditorium, you know, it probably needs another overhaul. When I was on the city council a long time ago, we spent $7 million redoing the whole thing over. And it doesn't seem like a lot of money now, but back in the 70s or early 80s, $7 million was a lot of money. And we did the whole place over soup to nuts. And it was at that time that I remember that they found out that there was an I-beam that went across the whole thing that was not attached at either side. So, you know, only the weight of the place held the I-beam in place, so that if there was an earthquake or something, the whole thing would have come tumbling down. But, you know, that's a memorial auditorium for veterans. You know, we do things like give them a parking space, give veterans a parking space, no excise tax, but, you know, that is a memorial for veterans that we should be paying attention to. And so, you know, what the city, you know, I think it was suggested in the council meeting a couple of weeks ago that maybe we should look at selling it off. And I don't think we should do that. I really think that what we should be doing is just looking at getting state money. I mean, that is, in a lot of ways, a very beautiful building. It's just got a lot of deferred maintenance and needs.
But it's becoming an afterthought, you know, people aren't coming back.
Wow.
And I talked to Bill Samaras about turning it into a nonprofit, like other places have done, and where the veterans still control, they still have a seat at the board, you know, because right now, if you tried to do anything, you couldn't do it because that was built for the veterans, you have to get state legislation. Providence went through the same thing. The guy who used to be here before Tommy McKay's group did it, Singleton, he's down in Providence, and he rescued that place. They were gonna close it down.
Yeah.
And they turned it into a nonprofit, they raised a lot of money. The MRT is doing fine, because they got benefactors. Nancy Donahue paid for all those renovations, basically,
Right.
and everything. Who's gonna be the benefactor? They basically did on a small scale, what should be happening to that whole place, it's not gonna get done,
Right.
you know?
Well, it's been done 2 times in my lifetime, where it's been done.
No, you don't have to put up taxpayers' money, that's what I'm saying,
That's-
that's gonna be difficult.
Yes. In terms of the usage of the building, I think that it was a mistake, and I thought it was a mistake at the time, to have the same people that
That's
do the.
Yeah,
The same,
yeah.
you know, there's
There's
no
no
competition.
incentive for
That
that.
was,
Right.
Yeah.
Bernie
And so
told us.
that's like the little brother or the little sister.
How long
Kind
is
of-
the contract?
I
think it was 5 years,
The
wasn't it?
contract was, 3 or 5 year
5 years,
contract.
yeah.
So
Um,
there's,
Because they always re-up for 5 years,
all right, so there's 2 remaining, is that about right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there are, you know, within the contract, I'm pretty sure there were escapes. They were supposed to have, meet certain goals, and if they didn't meet the goals, then it wasn't gonna work out that way. But there was, if you recall, on the city council, when that came up, that was a pretty controversial
Yes.
thing, and how that was all gonna work out. And, you know, I mean, the Golden Gloves was, even then was, you know, had less people, but they just were getting less shows than what they had before. And so the worry was, and I think it's come to pass, is that the auditorium would only get shows that they focus on the Songus Arena, and then whatever's left over.
The scraps.
For the, yeah. And, you know, it's a great venue, you know, the acoustics in there are really good, and they could be doing a lot better than what they are doing. You know, down in Lynn, they have shows all the time. They've got their auditorium in their city hall, and they've got shows down there all the time, and that's probably about the, you know, maybe a little smaller than the.
You know who's doing a lot of the shows down there?
No.
Peter Lally.
Oh, is he?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, Tommy McKay's son-in-law is also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But you look at what that auditorium has lost, I mean, okay, Lowell General, they got big, they moved, they used to have their hall there, okay, okay, so they moved it out, okay. The Middlesex, you know, the community forum, they now have it at the Songus.
No, it's still there.
It's still there? Who moved this out to the Songus? There's something that,
Enterprise still does it over there, Middlesex does it there, Lowell
there,
plans to
job-
move the
job
breakfast to
fairs
the,
there.
they moved the breakfast to the hotel, they moved the job fair to
okay,
Chelmsford.
yeah. So, I mean, it just seems
I
like it's
think
losing business.
what Tommy and crew did was they'd take a flyer on some things, and they'd lose
Yeah.
money on certain events just to,
Yeah.
to help out or to house it.
Right.
These guys,
They don't-
if it's gonna cost them money, they're gonna pass on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, but the facility itself, I mean, you look what they did in the Hanover Theater.
But that's not their responsibility.
No, but the Hanover hasn't had many dark days since they
Sure.
did it up in,
And it's a
Worcester,
great
so
act,
beautiful. Even this place in Merrimack College, the forum there, they've been advertising, they get a lot of,
Collins Center?
Yeah, that's
yeah,
the other high school.
they get more things going on in Lowell.
That's our high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I said, gee, how does this happen? But that's I mean, I just think that should be an economic engine. That's what Bill Topia told me. He says, this should be the economic engine for the downtown. And that's what how he conceived of it or felt about it. And I think that's why, you know, it just seems like the steam has come out of it.
Yeah, well, I think the steam's going back in it. I mean, Dan Rourke had 3 motions on regarding the auditorium last week. And I think we're waiting for the city manager to address those. But, you know, I think that's just the beginning. I think you're gonna see more focus on the auditorium going forward. Because I don't think anybody's happy with the usage or the condition of the buildings.
And the last city council was known for its alleged collegiality and harmony and all that. Is the council still like that today since you became mayor? And if it isn't, could you elaborate?
Yeah, I think that, I think that in general it is. I think that congeniality, the responsibility for that, or the credit for that, goes to all of the members of the city council. You know, I think that there was a lot of times when, you know, with the last city council, when maybe, you know, you'd have a motion in that I would agree with, but I just sort of bite my tongue and, you know, send it off through subcommittee and see what happens then. I've been on other councils where that's not the case, where, you know, people would come and attack you on that motion right away and maybe the motion fails. I think that this city council, which is, you know, comprised of mostly the same people on the other city council, I think that that congeniality still exists, and I think that Jim Leary is I think he's been a good addition to the council, replacing Bill Lyman. That's really the only thing, but I think everybody in general gets along and is very respectful of one another. It doesn't mean that everybody agrees on all of the issues all the time, but you don't want 9 people that agree on every issue all the time. You're way better off having debate on issues. You know, I think that's how you end up arriving at the best decision.
Let me just follow that up. Grant wasn't at the meeting last night, he was reassigned. I know you guys have a memo in your packet concerning a proposed development up off of Star Avenue in Belvedere, which the council initially took up last session, voted unanimously against, but then a member brought it back. And was that brought up last night?
Yes, that came up last night.
So, how did it come up and what was the resolution?
It came up as a response from the city manager, and I think basically the council took no action, and so the city manager's responses, after they're read, there's a discussion about each one of the responses, and then at the conclusion of that, there's generally a motion to, you know, accept the communications to the manager and place them on file, and that's what was done.
That's what, okay.
I think that, you know, what the council thought on that particular issue is that there really were no changes compared to the last time we heard the issue, which was about a year and a half ago. And at that time, there was a full public hearing and everything else, and people got to speak. And I think there's the family that owns the land would like to build a house there, but I think people that have bought houses around there, they don't want that, and they bought the houses thinking that there wouldn't be. But I think the overriding issue there for everybody is really the drainage and the water table, because of the hill is, at that point, is pretty, is significant, and dramatic, it's a dramatic drop. And so I think the reason there's water issues, the water seems to seep out of the hill there, as it comes down.
Did the council who brought it back speak on it last night?
The council who brought it back,
Council Elliott, yes.
Yeah. Council Elliott just brought up whether or not, talked about the water issues, and that was it, and there was no other.
Did he talk about the water issues when he voted against it?
I don't recall. I do recall, and I mentioned last night that when there was the larger hearing a year and a half ago, when we took it up before, that the water issue did come up. One of the families that was there last night, was there the last time, and they were talking about the water issues. They bought a house there, and then shortly after they bought the house, they were getting water in their cellar and stuff, and that was really just from the, so they brought that up, and they brought that up again last night. So you had last night, the people who were in favor of us doing the easement, and then you had other neighbors around that weren't in favor. And then Council Samaras, I should point out, is, he left the chamber for that, he was not there for any of that discussion.
Going back to economic development, tying this in with public safety, what's gonna happen with the JFK Plaza there? Isn't it time to consider moving that police department and fire department out of there? And, that place, I was there last Thursday, met with the chief, and, once again, talk about another place that's obsolete, archaic, floorboards, hiding holes right through. That cell block area is terrible. What eventually, what's the vision? Because I see a nice gathering spot there. I'd blow that whole place up, that would be Lowell's premier gathering spot, and there'd be all shops where the police department is right now. That'd be a nice, that'd be our mall, right there.
Okay.
That would be our mall, but, how much more can how much longer can you keep that place there?
I don't know, I think as I told you a while ago, I was over for a tour of the police station back last summer. And I actually was over to see the police chief, not about the station, but about having the whole police department get certified, and which I think is good, and I think would help in getting grants in the future if they were certified. There are certain police departments that are, and there was a report that came out a few years ago, the Matrix report, and that was done by, I ended up calling up the guy that did that report, and I asked him about the police station, and the report talks about how you get certified. And when I was talking to him, I asked him specifically about the facility itself, the police station, and I said, when you took a look at the police station, do you think that would be a roadblock? And he didn't seem to think that. I thought the police station was okay. After I met with the police chief, I took a tour of the station as well, and I would say that it's okay. Certainly there are areas that need to be done over. Down where they had the shooting range, that's an environmental problem now, because there's all lead that was all there, and it'd be very costly to do anything else there besides what's there. Now I guess if you have shooting areas, you would use either lasers or rubber bullets or something rather than lead. But back then we were using lead, and it was a big mistake. And that's been there 40 or 50 years, 55 years. Since the 60s, I think, is when that was built. It would be good to have a new police station, but I prioritize, and this was one of the questions that you asked at the candidates night. I prioritize the high school above the police station. But I think that I think it's good to look at whether or not it makes sense, and I think we're doing a study now on whether it makes sense to rehab the existing police station. And if that ends up being too costly or doesn't make any sense, then we'll have to take a look at putting it someplace else, which was the newer station. I sit on this committee for having to do with the Mahoney murders, and we meet periodically out at Tewksbury Police Station, which they got a police station about 15 years old or so now, and which is pretty spiffy, at least when you drive by, and it's spiffy when you're inside too. But they're telling me that their police station is too small now, that they need for it to be bigger. And if they came to Lowell, it'd be a whole different deal. This place is palatial compared to the Lowell Police Station. The Lowell Police Station, I think it's worth at least looking at whether or not it could be, it can be rehabbed and maybe get another 15 or 20 years out of it, or whether we can't do that. And I do think that a big part of that is going to be the environmental problems down in the basement.
How much will it take, you think, to wash the facade? Just that alone makes it look
Yeah.
dreary, and
That's
I
the
mean,
first
it's-
I've ever heard about the environmental hazard in the basement.
Well, the other
No,
thing,
I've
they're
heard-
running,
Have you?
I heard in the news, there was a firing range some town, they had to close down like the water supply because it was all
Oh, jeez.
polluted because of lead
Yeah,
from, same thing.
yeah. You know, back when it first opened in the sixties, no one thought of stuff like that, right? I mean, people were still using lead paint in their homes, so, you know, people are just shooting guns there all the time, and nobody's picking up the bullets or anything, so you just have all that lead around there, and it's an issue, at least that's what, you know, Bill Taylor told me that was a big problem there. But it's also a very expensive problem.
have you been happy with the response, public safety? I mean, we had a story that you wrote, it, crime is down 43%, there were no homicides last year in the city. And yet, they wanna get drones and surveillance cameras.
Yeah, it's, you know,
At $500,000 just
Right.
for the surveillance cameras.
I think that we've made, we've made great strides in terms of public safety, in the neighborhoods and even in the downtown. I think we're doing a lot better than we were doing, say, 4 years ago. I think that in the downtown, just having cops walking around ends up being a big thing and a deterrent, and I also think that visitors who come downtown feel a lot more secure just knowing that there's a cop across the street. You know, for instance, if you came in from Acton to have dinner in Bishop's and you parked your car, you might be a little apprehensive if you were gonna pass by 8 or 10 young kids. But if there's a cop across the street, you're gonna be okay with passing those 8 or 10 kids. And not that you should be apprehensive in the first place, but I think that there are some people that are. And so I think that that makes a difference downtown. You know, the shot spotter thing was, you know, I wasn't totally on board with that in the first place, just because I thought, you know, we weren't gonna be able to afford to do the whole city, we were only gonna be able to do certain pockets of the city. But I'm not on board with the cameras thing.
Yeah, talk to them about that. I mean, most of the businesses have cameras now, and they get it, but it doesn't prevent crime. I mean, it might help you solve a crime, and you know, so I think that the whole administration is rethinking that.
Yeah, which is a good thing. You know, when it came up a few weeks ago, the issue was, well, can we just use the money that was dedicated to the shot spotter to the cameras? Which I didn't think you could, but the city manager came back and said, no, we can't, we're gonna have to come in with another council vote to do that. And I don't expect for that vote to pass. You know, there was one comment that was made at one of the meetings that, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you care? But that's, you know, that's not really the final, that's not the issue, it's just the whole, you know, privacy, at least to me, it's just the whole privacy thing, that, you know, whether I'm doing anything wrong or not, why do I want somebody watching me all the time?
Good. Any other questions? I think we covered it again, but we'll appreciate you coming in, and hopefully we'll do this again, once the
Next week?
budget. No, but we'd love to talk to you once the budget is formulated and what might be in there and stuff
Okay.
like that. Discuss that and anything else that concern.
So maybe the end of June or beginning of July, something like that?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks, Eddie.